My own son looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, you need to apply for welfare. We can't help you." But what he didn't know was that I had $45 million sitting in my bank account the whole time. The words still cut through me like a knife every time I remember that moment. There I was, Barbara Thompson, a 70-year-old widow who had sacrificed everything for her family, being told by my own flesh and blood that I wasn't worth helping. The dismissive tone in his voice, the cold look in his wife's eyes, the way they made me feel like a burden they couldn't wait to get rid of. But here's what makes this story absolutely unbelievable. While my son Michael and his wife Jennifer were telling me to find government assistance because I'd lost my house, I was secretly one of the richest women in Georgia. $45 million from an inheritance I'd received 3 years earlier, money I'd never told them about because I wanted to see who my family really was when times got tough. I'm here in my beautiful new home in Savannah this morning, comfortable and secure at 78 years old, finally ready to tell you the whole truth about what happened when I tested my family's love and discovered exactly what they were made of. The coffee's brewing in my gourmet kitchen, my rescue cat Princess is purring beside me, and I've got all morning to share the most shocking story of family betrayal and justice you'll ever hear. You see, when you have that kind of money hidden away, and you watch your own children abandon you in your moment of need, it changes everything you thought you knew about the people you raised. While they were refusing to let me move in with them, telling neighbors I was too proud to seek help, and avoiding my phone calls, I was quietly watching them show their true colors. But this isn't just a story about ungrateful children. It's about what happens when you have the power to change lives, but choose to stay hidden in the shadows, watching people reveal who they really are when they think you have nothing left to offer them. That day when Michael told me to apply for welfare, I made a decision that would change everything. Not about the money. I'd already decided what to do with that. But about my family, about who deserved my love, and who deserved to learn the hardest lesson of their lives. Tell me in the comments what you're doing while you listen to my story. Are you drinking your morning coffee like me, taking care of an elderly parent, or maybe dealing with your own difficult family situation? Hit that like button because each like is so important to help stories like mine reach other families who need to understand the difference between love and obligation. And subscribe to Grandma's Legacy because no grandmother should ever have to face family betrayal alone. Now, before I tell you about the moment I revealed my secret and watched my son's world crumble, you need to understand how a woman who raised her children to be kind and grateful ended up with a son who could look at his homeless mother and tell her to find government help instead of opening his door. The story of how I got that $45 million is incredible enough, but what I did with it after my family abandoned me will restore your faith in justice and show you exactly what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty, and the ending will prove that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own choices. Let me take you back to 1985, when I was a 38-year-old mother of two, working double shifts as a nurse at Atlanta General Hospital while my husband Frank drove trucks to support our little family. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in Marietta, Georgia, nothing fancy but filled with love, laughter, and the kind of close family bonds I thought would last forever. Frank and I had been married 18 years, and we'd built our lives around our children. Michael, who was 15 and already showing signs of the ambition that would eventually make him successful in business, and Sarah, our sweet 13-year-old daughter who had Frank's gentle heart and my stubborn determination. Those were the days when family meant everything. Sunday dinners around our kitchen table, helping with homework every night, Frank coaching Michael's Little League team while I volunteered for Sarah's school fundraisers. We didn't have much money, but we had something I thought was more valuable. We had each other. I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, often picking up extra hours on weekends to help pay for the kids' school supplies, sports equipment, and the little extras that make childhood special. Frank would be on the road for days at a time, hauling freight across the Southeast. But when he came home, Our house would light up with his stories and his infectious laugh. The sacrifice was worth it because we were investing in our children's futures. When Michael wanted to join the debate team, we found the money for the tournaments. When Sarah needed a dress for homecoming, I worked overtime for 3 weeks to make sure she had something beautiful. That's what parents do. You give everything so your children can have better lives than you did. Frank was my rock through all of it. He'd call me from truck stops in Alabama or Tennessee, asking about my day, telling me he loved me, making plans for when he retired and we could finally travel together. We dreamed about visiting Europe, maybe taking a cruise, simple pleasures that seemed achievable if we just kept working and saving. But life has a way of changing your plans when you least expect it. In 1987, Frank was driving through a thunderstorm in Mississippi when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit his truck head-on. He died instantly, and in one horrible moment, everything I thought I could count on disappeared. The insurance settlement helped pay off the house and Frank's medical bills, but raising 2 teenagers alone on a nurse's salary was harder than I ever imagined. Michael stepped up in some ways, getting a part-time job at 16 to help with expenses, but he also became more distant, more focused on his own future than on our family's struggles. Sarah, bless her heart, tried to be the sunshine in our newly dark world. She'd make dinner when I worked late shifts, help Michael with his college applications, and never complained when we had to cut back on the extras that other families took for granted. I pushed both kids to excel in school because education was the one thing I could give them that would guarantee better lives. Michael earned a business scholarship to Georgia Tech, while Sarah got accepted to the University of Georgia with plans to become a teacher. I was so proud watching them walk across those graduation stages, knowing that Frank and I had succeeded in giving them opportunities we'd never had. Michael married Jennifer in 1995, a beautiful wedding that I helped pay for by working extra shifts for 6 months. Jennifer seemed sweet at first, a marketing executive from a well-off family in Buckhead who brought a level of sophistication to our family gatherings. But I noticed early on that she had expensive tastes and very little patience for people she considered beneath her social status. Sarah married her college sweetheart Tom in 1998, a wonderful man who became like the son I'd always hoped for. They moved to Oregon for his job, and while I missed them terribly, I was happy they'd found love and success together. By 2010, I was 55 and starting to think about retirement, but Michael and Jennifer's lifestyle seemed to require constant financial help. Down payments for houses, investments that didn't work out, Jennifer's shopping habits that always seemed to exceed their income. I found myself dipping into my modest savings repeatedly because, well, that's what mothers do for their children. The pattern continued for years. Michael would call with some financial emergency. I'd help however I could, and then months would pass without hearing from them unless they needed something else. Meanwhile, Sarah called every Sunday, visited when she could afford the plane tickets, and always asked about my health and happiness, not my bank account. But what happened in 2019 would change everything I thought I knew about family, money, and the true character of the people I'd spent my life loving unconditionally. The letter that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning in March 2019. I was 67 years old, recently retired from nursing, and living quietly in the same house where Frank and I had raised our children. The envelope bore the return address of Whitman, Bradley and Associates, attorneys at law, from Boston, Massachusetts, and I almost threw it away thinking it was some kind of scam. But something made me open it, and what I read left me sitting at my kitchen table in complete shock for over an hour. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," it began, "we regret to inform you of the passing of your cousin, Harold Eugene Mitchell, on February 15, 2019. According to his last will and testament, you have been named as the sole beneficiary of his estate, valued at approximately $45 million. Harold Eugene Mitchell." I had to think for several minutes before I even remembered who he was. My father's cousin's son, a quiet man who'd moved to Boston in the 1970s to work in early computer technology. I'd met him maybe 3 times in my entire life, at family funerals and one awkward Christmas gathering in the 1980s. According to the lawyers, Harold had never married, had no children, and had built a fortune through early investments in technology companies that became household names. He'd apparently followed our family from a distance, and in his will, he'd written that he wanted his money to go to the cousin who chose nursing over profit, sacrifice over selfishness, and family over fortune. $45 million. The number was so large I couldn't even process what it meant. All those years of working double shifts, all those times I'd helped Michael and Jennifer out of financial trouble, all the worry about whether my Social Security would be enough for retirement, and suddenly, none of it mattered. But here's where the story gets interesting, and where I made a decision that would reveal everything I needed to know about my family's true character. Instead of telling Michael and Jennifer about the inheritance immediately, something inside me hesitated. Maybe it was remembering how they only called when they needed money. Maybe it was noticing how Jennifer always seemed to calculate the cost of everything: my gifts, my home, my contributions to family gatherings. Or maybe it was the way Michael had become increasingly impatient with my stories, my concerns, my very presence in their busy, upwardly mobile lives. I decided to keep the inheritance secret for a while, just to see how my family treated me when they thought I was just a retired nurse living on a modest pension. It was meant to be a temporary test, a way to enjoy watching them be genuinely kind to me without any ulterior motives. What happened over the following months broke my heart in ways I never expected. The first sign came when my air conditioning unit died in July 2019, right in the middle of Georgia's brutal summer heat. The repair estimate was $4,800. Money I could now easily afford, but money that would have been devastating on my supposed nurse's pension. When I called Michael to ask if he knew any reliable HVAC contractors, he immediately launched into a lecture about living within my means and accepting that retirement requires sacrifices. When I mentioned that the heat was making my blood pressure medication less effective, Jennifer got on the phone and suggested I look into senior housing where maintenance isn't my responsibility. Senior housing. My own son and daughter-in-law were suggesting I sell the home where I'd raised them, where Frank and I had built our life together, because they didn't want to be bothered with helping me afford a necessary repair. Meanwhile, Sarah called from Oregon the same day, and when she heard about my air conditioning situation, she immediately offered to send money. "Mom, you shouldn't be dealing with this alone. Tom and I can help, and we'll figure out how to get you a more reliable system." The contrast was stunning. My daughter, living 2,000 miles away on a teacher's salary, was ready to sacrifice her own family's budget to help me, while my son, who lived 20 minutes away and earned 6 figures, was suggesting I sell my home rather than inconvenience him. But it got worse. Much worse. In October 2019, I had a minor fall in my backyard that resulted in a sprained ankle and some bruised ribs. Nothing serious, but at 67, it was scary enough that I called Michael for help getting to the emergency room. "Mom, Jennifer and I are at a charity gala tonight," he said with obvious irritation. "Can't you call an ambulance or something? We really can't leave right now. There are important people here I need to network with." A charity gala was more important than his injured mother. I sat in that emergency room alone for 6 hours, watching families comfort each other, feeling more isolated than I'd felt since Frank died. When Sarah heard about the fall, she was on a plane from Portland within 2 days, taking unpaid leave from her teaching job to spend a week making sure I was okay, cooking meals I could manage with my injured ribs, and researching home safety modifications. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Every interaction with Michael and Jennifer felt transactional. What could I do for them? How little effort could they expend on me? How quickly could they redirect conversations away from my needs and back to their busy, important lives? But they had no idea that their burden of an elderly mother was secretly wealthier than they could imagine, and I was watching every dismissive comment, every avoided phone call, every excuse for why they couldn't help with growing amazement at what my children had become. The real test was still coming, though. The moment that would show me exactly who my family really was and force me to make a decision that would change all our lives forever. The moment that shattered my heart and opened my eyes to who my son really was came on a cold February morning in 2021, almost 2 years after I'd received the inheritance that was still my secret. I was 68 years old and facing the worst crisis of my life since Frank's death. I was losing my house. Not because I couldn't afford it, of course, but because a predatory lending scam had targeted elderly homeowners in my neighborhood, and I'd been foolish enough to fall for it while trying to appear like I was struggling financially on my fixed income. The scammers had convinced me to take out a reverse mortgage that I didn't understand, with terms that escalated so quickly that I owed more than the house was worth within 18 months. It was my own fault for trying to maintain the charade of being a poor retiree, and now I was facing foreclosure in 30 days. I could have solved the problem instantly with my hidden fortune, but I decided this would be the ultimate test. Would my family step up for me in a genuine crisis, or would they abandon me when I needed them most? I called Michael on a Tuesday evening, my voice shaking with genuine fear, despite knowing I had options he couldn't imagine. "Michael, honey, I need to talk to you about something serious. I'm in trouble with the house, and I don't know what to do." "What kind of trouble, Mom?" His voice already carried that tone of annoyance I'd grown to recognize whenever I called with any kind of problem. "I got involved with this reverse mortgage thing, and it went bad. Real bad. They're foreclosing in 30 days, and I don't have anywhere to go." The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When Michael finally spoke, his words hit me like physical blows. "Jesus, Mom, how could you be so irresponsible? Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Jennifer and I have worked hard to build our reputation in this community, and now we're going to have family members who are homeless. Not, how can we help you? Not, we'll figure this out together." His first concern was how my crisis might affect his social standing. "Michael, I was wondering, I know it's not ideal, but could I maybe stay with you and Jennifer for a few months while I figure out what to do next? I promise I wouldn't be any trouble, and I could help with cooking and cleaning." The response came so quickly, it was clear he'd been dreading this exact conversation. "Mom, that's not going to work. Jennifer and I have very demanding careers, and we need our space. Plus, we're trying to start a family, and having you there would complicate things. If you're feeling the heartbreak and disbelief of this rejection right now, show your support. Hit that like button, comment if you've ever been abandoned by family when you needed them most, and subscribe because we strong women need to stick together when the people who should love us turn their backs." "But Michael, I don't have anywhere else to go. I raised you in that house. I sacrificed everything to give you a good life. Mom, you need to understand something." His voice took on the condescending tone he probably used with difficult clients. "You're not our responsibility. You made these financial decisions as an adult, and you need to deal with the consequences as an adult." The words hung in the air like poison. Not their responsibility. The woman who had worked double shifts to pay for his college, who had gone without new clothes for years to afford his baseball equipment, who had emptied her savings multiple times to bail him out of his own financial mistakes. I was not their responsibility. What am I supposed to do, Michael? Look, Mom, you need to apply for welfare, check into senior housing, maybe see if the county has programs for people in your situation. There are government assistance programs specifically for this kind of thing. Government assistance. My own son, whom I'd raised to be kind and generous, was telling his 68-year-old mother to apply for welfare rather than offering her a place to stay in the house I'd helped him buy. "And Mom," Jennifer's voice came on the line. She'd apparently been listening to this entire conversation. "You really should have thought about this before you made such poor financial choices. We can't enable irresponsible behavior by bailing you out every time you make a mistake." Every time I made a mistake? This was the first time in my entire life I'd ever asked them for help with anything significant, and they were talking to me like I was a chronic burden who'd been draining their resources for years. "I understand," I said quietly, though I didn't understand at all how I'd raised such cold, selfish people. "I'll figure something out." "Good. And Mom, maybe don't mention this foreclosure thing to people we know. It would be better for everyone if we kept family problems private. They hung up, leaving me sitting in my kitchen, technically homeless in 30 days, with $45 million in my bank account and the devastating knowledge that my own son would rather see me on welfare than inconvenience his precious lifestyle. But while I was processing this betrayal, my phone rang again. It was Sarah calling from Oregon with news that would make Michael and Jennifer's abandonment even more appalling. Mom, Tom got a promotion and we've been talking. We want you to move out here with us. We found this beautiful mother-in-law suite attached to a house we can afford, and we think it would be perfect for all of us. My daughter, who made a fraction of Michael's income, was offering me a home while my wealthy son told me to apply for government assistance. That night, as I sat in the house I was about to lose, surrounded by 43 years of memories and facing the cruelest betrayal of my life, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time for Michael and Jennifer to learn exactly what they'd thrown away when they told me I wasn't their responsibility. The morning after Michael told me to apply for welfare, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. At 68 years old, I'd learned exactly who my family really was, and now it was time to decide what I was going to do about it. First, I called the foreclosure attorney and paid off my entire mortgage in cash, all $247,000 of it. Just like that, my housing crisis was solved with a wire transfer that represented less than half of 1% of my hidden fortune. Then I called Sarah in Oregon and told her the truth. Honey, I need to tell you something that's going to shock you, but I want you to hear it from me first. Mom, what's wrong? You sound different. 3 years ago, I inherited $45 million from Cousin Harold. I've been keeping it secret because I wanted to see how our family would treat me when they thought I had nothing to offer them. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly a minute before Sarah whispered, "Oh my God, Mom. $45 million? And you've been living like, wait, the foreclosure, Michael telling you to apply for welfare, you let that happen on purpose?" I needed to know, Sarah. I needed to know who would love me when they thought I was just a burden, and who would abandon me when I couldn't benefit their lives anymore. Sarah started crying, not tears of greed or excitement about the money, but tears of heartbreak for what her brother had revealed about himself. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry Michael treated you that way. That's not the brother I grew up with. No, honey, it's not, but it's who he became, and now I know. My next call was to a family attorney in Savannah, Georgia. I'd decided it was time to leave Atlanta and all its painful memories behind. Within 2 weeks, I'd purchased a beautiful historic home on one of Savannah's most prestigious squares, paid in cash, naturally, and began planning the most important phone call of my life. But first, I had some business to take care of. If Michael thought I should be relying on government assistance, then I was going to show him what real generosity looked like. I donated $5 million to the Atlanta Food Bank, specifically funding a program for homeless elderly individuals. I gave $2 million to a local charity that helps seniors avoid predatory lending scams, the very kind I'd pretended to fall for. Another $3 million went to establish a scholarship fund at Georgia Tech for students from single-parent homes. Students like Michael had been after Frank died. Each donation was made in Frank Thompson's name, ensuring that my late husband's legacy would be about helping vulnerable people rather than the selfishness his son had displayed. The local news covered the donations extensively. Anonymous benefactor establishes major charitable foundation in memory of beloved truck driver, the headlines read. The irony was perfect. Michael, who was so worried about his reputation in the community, had no idea that his welfare-bound mother had become one of Atlanta's most significant philanthropists. 3 months after my move to Savannah, I was ready for the conversation that would change everything. I called Michael on a Thursday evening, knowing he'd be home from work, but not yet settled into whatever social event Jennifer had planned for them. "Hi, Michael. I wanted to give you an update on how I'm doing since our last conversation." "Oh, hey, Mom." "Yeah, How did that government assistance thing work out? Did you get into some kind of senior housing? The casual dismissiveness in his voice, the assumption that his abandoned mother had simply faded into whatever social services system would take responsibility for her, reinforced everything I'd learned about who he'd become. Actually, Michael, that's not what happened at all. I need to tell you something, and I want you to sit down. Mom, I'm kind of busy. Can this wait? No, it can't. Michael, 3 years ago, I inherited $45 million from Cousin Harold. I've been keeping it secret to see how my family would treat me when they thought I had nothing to offer them. The silence was so complete, I could hear Jennifer's voice in the background asking who was on the phone. What? 45 million? That's not possible. You were losing your house. You were broke. I was never broke, Michael. I was testing you. And you failed in ways I never imagined possible. Testing me? What the hell, Mom? You put us through all that drama about foreclosure and needing help when you had $45 million? That's insane. Notice how quickly his tone shifted from dismissive to angry? Not ashamed of how he'd treated me, not apologetic for abandoning me, but furious that he'd been tricked into revealing his true character. Michael, I told you I was losing my house and asked for help. You told me I wasn't your responsibility and to apply for welfare. That wasn't drama. That was you showing me exactly who you are. Jennifer's voice came on the line, sharp with the kind of outrage that only comes from realizing you've made a catastrophic mistake. Barbara, this is absolutely manipulative behavior. You can't test people like that and then punish them for not knowing information you deliberately withheld. Actually, Jennifer, I can, and I did. And now you both know exactly what I think of children who abandon their parents in crisis. What I said next would haunt Michael and Jennifer for years to come, but it was a decision I'd made with complete certainty after months of watching their true colors shine through. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady with the kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty about your decisions. I've already donated $8 million to Atlanta charities in your father's name. Charities that help exactly the kind of people you suggested I become when you told me to seek government assistance. Michael's voice cracked when he responded. Mom, wait. Let's talk about this. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding, Michael. You told me I wasn't your responsibility when I lost my house. You suggested I apply for welfare rather than letting me stay with you temporarily. Those weren't misunderstandings. Those were choices that showed me exactly who you are. I could hear Jennifer whispering frantically in the background, probably calculating how much money her husband's cruelty had just cost them. As for the rest of my inheritance, I continued, I'm establishing a trust fund for Sarah's children, your nephews who you barely see because visiting them doesn't benefit your social climbing. They'll have full college funding and more because their mother showed me what family loyalty actually looks like. Mom, please, Michael's voice was desperate now. I made a mistake. I was stressed about work, and I didn't handle things well. But you're my mother. Surely that counts for something. Being your mother counted for something when I worked double shifts to pay for your college. It counted when I went without new clothes for 3 years to afford your baseball equipment. It counted when I emptied my savings account 4 times to bail you out of your own financial mistakes. But when I needed help, I wasn't your mother then. I was just a burden you didn't want to deal with. The truth hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had burned down everything they thought they knew about their future. Jennifer grabbed the phone, her voice shaking with barely controlled panic. Barbara, you can't be serious about this. We're family. Families forgive each other and move forward. Surely we can work this out like adults. Adults, Jennifer? Adults don't abandon their 68-year-old mother-in-law when she faces homelessness. Adults don't tell someone who sacrificed everything for them to apply for welfare instead of offering basic human decency. What happened next was the most satisfying part of this entire experience. Michael and Jennifer started making promises, offering compromises, suggesting family therapy, all the things they could have offered when I actually needed help, but only now when they realized what their coldness had cost them. Mom, We have that guest bedroom we've been using as an office. You could move in tomorrow. We could convert it into a beautiful apartment for you." The same guest bedroom that hadn't been available when I was facing foreclosure was suddenly perfect for me now that they knew about my fortune. "Michael, 3 months ago I asked if I could stay with you temporarily while I figured out my housing situation. Do you remember what you told me?" I said it wasn't going to work out because we needed our space." "That's right. You needed your space more than your mother needed a roof over her head. Well, now I have my own space, a beautiful historic home in Savannah that I bought with cash, and you can have all the space you want." The desperation in their voices was almost pitiful. Michael started telling me about all the ways they could spend time together, trips we could take, experiences we could share. Jennifer mentioned grandchildren they were planning to have, suggesting I'd want to be part of their lives. Everything they were offering now had been available to them when they thought I was poor. The only difference was my bank account balance, which told me everything I needed to know about what they actually valued. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, preparing to deliver the final consequence of their choices. "I've hired a private investigator to research every charity, every cause, every organization that's ever benefited from your family's supposed generosity." The silence was deafening. "Because I'm curious, Michael. You were so concerned about your reputation in the community when I faced foreclosure. I want to see exactly how generous you've been with your 6-figure income when it came to helping people who actually needed assistance." Of course, what the investigation revealed was exactly what I expected. Despite their expensive lifestyle and social climbing, Michael and Jennifer's charitable giving amounted to less than $500 per year, barely enough to qualify for tax deductions, and certainly nothing that would suggest they understood what it meant to help vulnerable people. Meanwhile, the welfare-seeking mother they'd abandoned had quietly become one of Georgia's most significant benefactors to causes supporting elderly and homeless individuals. The irony was so perfect it almost felt like poetic justice from the universe itself. But the real consequences of their choices were just beginning to unfold, because small communities like Atlanta's social elite are very interested in how prominent families treat their elderly parents. 6 months after revealing my secret to Michael and Jennifer, I was living my best life in Savannah while watching their world crumble from the comfortable distance of 250 miles. My new home on Monterey Square was everything I'd dreamed of during those long nursing shifts 40 years earlier. Elegant, peaceful, and filled with the kind of natural light that makes every morning feel like a gift. The wraparound porch overlooked one of Savannah's most beautiful parks, and I spent hours there with my coffee, reading, and planning how to use my resources to make a real difference in the world. But the best part of my new life wasn't the house or the financial security. It was discovering what it felt like to be surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. My neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Watson, was an 82-year-old retired librarian who'd lived on the square for 60 years. She knocked on my door the day I moved in with a homemade peach cobbler and a smile that reminded me what genuine Southern hospitality looked like. "Welcome to the neighborhood, dear. I'm Eleanor, and if you need anything, directions, recommendations, or just someone to chat with over coffee, I'm right next door." Within weeks, Eleanor had introduced me to a wonderful circle of Savannah women, mostly retirees like myself, who'd built rich, meaningful lives around friendship, community service, and the kind of authentic relationships I'd been missing for years. We called ourselves the Monterey Square Ladies, and we met every Tuesday for coffee and planning sessions for our various charitable projects. These women, former teachers, nurses, small business owners, had more wisdom, humor, and genuine warmth than all of Michael and Jennifer's social climbing friends combined. Through them, I discovered the joy of anonymous giving on a personal level. When Eleanor mentioned that her church was struggling to fund their Meals on Wheels program for shut-in elderly members, I quietly donated enough money to run it for 5 years. When my friend Margaret worried about her grandson's college tuition, I anonymously funded a scholarship that covered his entire education. The beauty of having more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes was that I could solve problems without anyone knowing where the help came from. It felt like being a fairy godmother, except instead of magic wands, I had wire transfers. But perhaps the most meaningful part of my new life was reconnecting with Sarah in a way that distance had previously made difficult. She and Tom visited Savannah every few months, bringing my precious grandsons to explore the historic squares and enjoy the kind of multi-generational family time I'd always dreamed of. "Mom," Sarah said during one of their visits, as we watched her boys play in Forsyth Park, "you seem happier than I've seen you since Dad died. This move was exactly what you needed." She was right. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning excited about my day instead of dreading phone calls from people who only wanted something from me. I'd also started working with a financial advisor to establish the Frank Thompson Foundation, a charitable organization focused on supporting elderly individuals facing housing crises, predatory lending situations, and family abandonment. The foundation would ensure that my wealth continued helping vulnerable people long after I was gone. Meanwhile, the consequences of Michael and Jennifer's choices continued to unfold in Atlanta in ways that were both satisfying and educational. Word had gotten out in their social circle about how they'd treated me during my supposed financial crisis. In a community where reputation and family values mattered enormously, the story of wealthy young professionals abandoning an elderly mother who'd sacrificed everything for them didn't reflect well on their character. Jennifer's involvement with the Junior League became complicated when other members learned about her role in suggesting I seek government assistance rather than offering help. Several charity organizations quietly declined the couple's offers to participate in fundraising events, preferring not to be associated with people whose private behavior contradicted their public generosity. Michael's business relationships also suffered. In the South, how you treat your elderly parents is considered a direct reflection of your integrity, and clients began questioning whether they wanted to work with someone who'd abandoned his own mother in her time of need. But the most dramatic consequence came when they tried to reconcile with me through increasingly desperate gestures. Michael began sending elaborate flower arrangements weekly, accompanied by cards describing family memories and expressing regret for his temporary lapse in judgment. Jennifer wrote long emails detailing plans for family vacations we could take together and home renovations that would make me more comfortable if I moved back to Atlanta. Their efforts had the opposite of the intended effect. Every expensive gesture, every attempt to buy their way back into my good graces only reinforced that they saw our relationship as a transaction rather than genuine family bond. The final straw came when they showed up unannounced at my Savannah home on a Saturday morning, apparently having driven down overnight to stage some kind of dramatic reconciliation scene. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said, standing on my beautiful porch with Jennifer beside him, both looking like they'd barely slept. "We've been thinking about everything that happened, and we realize we made some terrible mistakes," Jennifer added, her voice carefully modulated in that way people use when they're trying to sound sincere, but really just want something. I invited them in for coffee, curious to see what kind of performance they'd prepared for this visit. "Mom, I know I hurt you," Michael began, settling into my elegant living room that was clearly much nicer than anything in their own home. "I was stressed about work and finances, and I didn't handle your situation well. But I want you to know that I've learned from this experience." "What exactly have you learned, Michael?" "I've learned that family comes first, no matter what. And I want to make it up to you." Jennifer jumped in with their prepared pitch. "We've been thinking, Barbara, that maybe we could all invest in some real estate together. Or perhaps you'd like to help us start a family foundation. We could do so much good together with your resources." There it was. Not an apology for their behavior, not genuine remorse for abandoning me, but a business proposition designed to give them access to my money while making them look like charitable family members. "That's an interesting offer," I said calmly. "But I have a question for you. If I'd never inherited this money, if I really had been facing welfare and homelessness like you thought, what would you be doing right now?" The question hung in the air like a challenge they couldn't meet. We would have found a way to help you," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Michael. You told me I wasn't your responsibility. You suggested I apply for government assistance rather than letting me stay in your guest room for a few weeks. That's what you would be doing right now. Nothing. The only reason you're sitting in my living room talking about family foundations is because you found out I have $45 million. What I did next changed everything between us permanently. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd been saving for exactly this moment. I want to show you something, I said, opening the folder to reveal bank statements, donation receipts, and legal documents. This is what I've done with my inheritance since our last conversation. I showed them the receipts for the $8 million I donated to Atlanta charities, the scholarship fund I'd established at Georgia Tech, the housing assistance program I'd funded for elderly individuals facing exactly the situation they thought I was in. $45 million, Michael. And in 6 months, I've given away almost $18 million of it to causes that help vulnerable people, the kind of people you thought I should become. Jennifer's face went white as she calculated the numbers. 18 million? Barbara, that's not sustainable. You'll run out of money if you keep giving it away like that. Jennifer, 18 million is less than half of my inheritance. I could give away $10 million every year for the rest of my life and still leave more money to Sarah's children than most people see in their lifetimes. The magnitude of what they'd lost by abandoning me finally hit them. This wasn't just about missing out on some modest inheritance from an elderly mother. This was about losing access to generational wealth that could have transformed their lives and their children's lives forever. Mom. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. I know I can't undo what I said, but I'm begging you to give me another chance. I swear to you, I'll be different. Michael. You've had 38 years to show me who you are as an adult. The last 3 years, when you thought I needed help, you showed me exactly what kind of man you'd become. I don't need to give you another chance to pretend to be someone different. That afternoon, after they'd driven back to Atlanta in stunned silence, I called Sarah to tell her about their visit. Mom, I'm so proud of how you handled that, she said. It must have been hard to see Michael like that. Actually, honey, it wasn't hard at all. It was clarifying. I finally understand that the son I raised and loved is gone, and the person who replaced him isn't someone I need in my life. The most beautiful part of my new life was that I didn't need Michael and Jennifer's approval or presence to be happy. The Monterey Square ladies had become my chosen family. Sarah and her boys provided all the genuine family love I needed, and my charitable work gave me more purpose than I'd felt since my nursing days. I established the Barbara Thompson Foundation with $20 million, focused specifically on helping elderly individuals avoid the financial scams and family abandonment I'd pretended to experience. The foundation provided emergency housing assistance, legal aid for elder abuse cases, and support groups for seniors whose families had turned their backs on them. The work was deeply personal and incredibly rewarding. Every month, I met with people who'd been told by their own children that they weren't their responsibility, and I was able to provide them with both practical help and the emotional validation that they deserved better treatment from the people they'd sacrificed everything to raise. Michael and Jennifer made a few more attempts to reconcile over the following year, each more desperate and transparent than the last. They sent expensive gifts on my birthday, showed up unannounced for holidays, and even tried using mutual acquaintances to plead their case. But every gesture only reinforced the transactional nature of how they viewed relationships. They weren't sorry for hurting me. They were sorry for missing out on my money. The final proof came when Jennifer's sister mentioned in casual conversation that the couple had been consulting with attorneys about whether they could legally challenge my charitable donations as evidence of diminished mental capacity. The idea that giving away money to help vulnerable people was proof of insanity perfectly captured their mindset about wealth and responsibility. At 78 years old, I'd learned the most liberating lesson of my entire life. You get to choose your family, and sometimes the people who deserve your love aren't the ones who share your DNA. My new life in Savannah, surrounded by genuine friends and focused on meaningful charitable work, was proof that it's never too late to start over, never too late to find your tribe, and never too late to discover that your greatest revenge against people who underestimated you is simply living well without them. As I sit here in my sunroom this morning, looking out at the Spanish moss swaying in the gentle savanna breeze, I want to share the most important lessons I've learned from this journey that completely transformed my understanding of family, money, and what really matters in life. First, money doesn't change people. It reveals who they already were. When Michael and Jennifer thought I was poor and struggling, they showed me their true character by abandoning me in my moment of need. When they discovered I was wealthy, their sudden interest in reconciliation proved that they'd always seen our relationship as transactional. The inheritance didn't make them greedy. It simply exposed greed that was already there. Second, sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them face the natural consequences of their choices. I could have rescued Michael and Jennifer from the social and professional consequences of their behavior, but that would have robbed them of the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. By stepping back and allowing them to experience the results of treating family members as disposable, I gave them the chance to grow. Whether they take it or not is up to them. Third, real family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, kindness, and mutual support. My daughter Sarah, who offered to help me when she thought I had nothing, proved that she understood what family means. My Monterey Square ladies, who welcomed me with open hearts and no expectations, became the sisters I never had. Meanwhile, the son I'd sacrificed everything to raise became a stranger whose values I no longer recognized. Fourth, it's never too late to start over and build the life you actually want. At 70 years old, when most people assume your story is already written, I discovered that I could create an entirely new chapter filled with purpose, genuine relationships, and the joy that comes from using your resources to make a real difference in the world. Fifth, the best test of someone's character is how they treat you when you can't benefit them. Those 3 years when my family thought I was just a struggling retiree showed me everything I needed to know about who deserved my love, my time, and eventually, my legacy. If this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice touched your heart, like this video right now, tell me in the comments about a time when someone showed their true colors when you needed them most, and subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because every grandmother deserves to know that her worth isn't measured by what she can provide for others, but by the love and wisdom she carries in her heart. To any woman watching this who's dealing with ungrateful family members or questioning her own value because others take her for granted, remember that you have more power than you realize. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling bad behavior and let people learn what life looks like without your constant sacrifice and support. At 78 years old, I've learned that respect is earned, not owed, regardless of family relationships. I've learned that generosity should flow toward those who appreciate it, not those who expect it. And I've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a grandmother can say is simply, "No. You had your chance, and you chose poorly." Michael thought he was telling a burden to find government assistance. Instead, he was teaching a millionaire exactly where his priorities lay. The joke, as they say, was on him. Never underestimate the power of a grandmother who knows her worth, especially when she has 45 million reasons to prove it.